Hi, welcome to Game Creation. So today's video, what we're going to do is try and create the grid for our RPG game and the player. Now, we're not going to have any graphics at all. We might have different colours just to distinguish them. But remember, the point of today and the point of this week is to create the minimum viable product, which means strip away all of that stuff. You can spend hours obsessing with the graphics and make sure that you've got that right. There is no point, because if the gameplay doesn't work, or if there's something that comes up down the line that actually you need the player to be a lot less graphical or a lot more graphical or have a different colour or whatever it is, you're going to have to redo that work. So let's get the game working first and then worry about all the fancy business later on. So you're going to look at this and you're going to think, this is really, really simple. And that's the point. If your first iteration is not at its simplest, then you are wasting time for this philosophy we're doing with this channel. So I hope you find this useful. Let's switch over to the screen. So I've started a new project in ClickTeam Fusion, and I've saved it as RPG v0.01. Now, one of the things that annoys me is that it automatically assumes that the project is going to be v0.01. Now, I've put that in so that each time I sort of iterate on it and improve it, I can shift the version numbers so that I know what the most up-to-date project is. And with my planning, I always write down what version I did what, and therefore if it breaks or if it didn't work, I can go back a version to fix it without having to try and figure out what I did. I can load that up and see whether it was working at that stage. There's a whole load of benefits. In the real world, you use something like Git, which is a huge undo website that just tracks your progress. In fact, it's not a website necessarily, but it's a way of just tracking your progress automatically. So every time you upload new code, it remembers what the old code was, and you can use like a timeline to go back in time and select a previous one. ClickTeam doesn't necessarily have that I know. Someone's probably going to comment and say, yes, it does. Please do. Please let me know. So I just use these traditional ways. But I don't want my project to be named that, because every time I save it from now on, it will be saved as that project. So I want to just click on it lightly, click on it again, or you can right click and rename. And I'm just going to remove that from the project name. So it's just going to be RPG, and I'm going to click save. That doesn't save it now as RPG. It's still saved with the version numbers, but it's now called RPG, which is what I wanted. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to create the grid for this, and I want the minimum possible grid, and that's going to be the objective of this video. I'm not interested in doing it properly. I will do that later on, and we'll talk about how to do it with fast loops and all that wonderful stuff, but I just want a grid and quick. So I double click here, and you go to background. So you'll start up on here and you click background and you click quick backdrop and click it here. Now that's too big for me, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into size position, and I can pick 64. Now the reason 64 is quite a nice value to pick is computers love things that are products of 2 because of the way binary works and all that stuff. So it's always good to pick a sequence of 2. It's not essential, you don't have to, you could do 100, it's no problem at all. It's just it gives you opportunities to scale nicely and to work within kind of pixels later on, and a little bit more in-depth stuff which we're not going to go into. Okay, so I'm going to change this to a motif, because the thing is, if I drag this out now, it won't tile. If you have a look, it won't tile, it will just look all the same colour. So I'm going to press Ctrl and Z and undo that. And I'm going to change this to motive. Now what motive does is it creates a lovely tile effect. So if I click edit, and I'm going to pick a nice colour, and I already have picked one, a nice purple, so I'm just going to click and drag that through, click OK. And what this now will do is create a motive, which means it just repeats the same 64 by 64 pattern. So if I drag this out, again, it doesn't look like it's done anything. But if I click edit, and I don't know, I'll put a dot in it. So just put a dot in the middle. Oh, I'm using the same colour. Change the colour. I'll put a dot in the middle or something. Click OK, and you can see that dot throughout. I'm going to press Ctrl and Z and undo that because I don't want a dot. And I'm going to click edit again. Now what I want to do is I want to create tiles. So you'd think you click on the square thing, and I'm not going to fill it because it's already got a fill, and you just kind of go around it in the square, 1 pixel wide. There we go. Click OK, and I'm just going to drag that out. And two things you notice. The first thing is that if I zoom in, the effect works quite nicely, but if you look around the sides, they are 1 pixel, but if you look down here, they're 2 pixels. Well, why is that happening? Well, it's getting 1 pixel from the left-hand tile and 1 pixel from the right-hand tile, and they're coming together into 2 pixels, which we do not want. That, to me, is a bit thick, although actually that doesn't look too bad. The other thing you notice is it's actually very small. It's gone to 32, so if I click Edit, and I look at the sizing, and it's gone for 32 by 32, so I just want to change that to 64 by 64 and apply. And I'm just going to zoom out. So I want to go back to basics a little bit here. So I want to fill again, but I want to get that color back, so I use this and collect that color and just maybe drag with the fill. There we go. So what I want to do is not for them to add together. So if I was to do as we did before, and I haven't clicked black, there we go, that's black border, and it's a bit harder to do when it's bigger, but that's fine. If I clicked OK again, you've still got 2 pixels there, which we don't want, so edit, and all I do is just remove the top left one or the bottom right one. I'm going to remove the bottom right one, so I'm going to select that purple again and remove the right hand one and remove the bottom one, being very careful to keep that pixel, the top right and the bottom left pixel there. Click OK, and there we go. Now something you might notice is these ones kind of disappear. That's because of the way that the screen is presenting the stuff. Sometimes the screen has to make a call whether to present a pixel or not. It is normal, but if you zoom in and make it bigger, it comes back, and let's just test that we can see it when we run it. And we can see it nicely, so that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. When you zoom out, if you look, they disappear completely. It's because they're only a pixel wide, so when you've zoomed out enough, it then makes them like 0.3 of a pixel, and it's up to the screen to decide whether it's valuable enough to show, because it ends up having to be thicker than you want. It's thicker than 1 pixel essentially, and take up more of the real estate. So just bear that in mind. Don't panic that at certain zoom levels they randomly disappear when you're working with 1 pixel wide borders. Just check on the main thing that they display nicely, and they should, because the main, so if I click run application, this is running at 640 by 480, so it accounts for every single pixel at that screen, so it should work nicely. Okay, the other issue, if I run that again, you'll see that there's a white space at the left and top, and the reason for that is I haven't placed it very well. I could sit there for hours trying to get this perfect, or just click on it and go to size and position and change the X to 0 and the Y to 0. And it's really important to realise that 0, 0 is not at the bottom left, which in maths classes you're used to. It's at the top left. So the Y increases as you go down, and the X increases as you go right. That bit you're used to, 0 and then X increases. This bit you're not, 0 and Y increases going down. That's common for a lot of programming languages. Now this is a little bit bigger than I like, so let's just try and drag that up. I want that last one in, so I'm not too fussed about it going off, but I do want this first tile to be here, because that's going to be important for later on. And there's our grid. Fantastic. We're now going to be doing the character, and the character is a little bit easier because I'm just going to double click, go to active, paste it in somewhere there. Go change the size of it first, and you can do it within here, or you can do it on that panel there. I'm going to change it to 6464 because that's the size of our grid. I'm just going to fill in the whole thing. I'm going to do it a different color that I can see next to the background color, and perhaps for me I might just, in fact let's change the size of this, I might just draw a stick man like that, and just briefly write player if I can fit it. And the reason for this is the only thing I want this to do is distinguish between enemies and players, because when we do enemies later on, we might not have finalized the graphics for this. And I'm just going to click OK. And so we want to make sure that I can tell the difference between the player and the enemy. So it's sensible just to make it a little bit obvious what it is, but it doesn't, like, at this stage, don't worry about graphics. You can spend years and years, perhaps not years, but ages and ages trying to get the perfect graphic, and your game engine just is never going to work. So always stick with the basics. I want to place this somewhere sensible. So for instance, I might want it to be in this tile here. Now again, I can try and place it precisely, or I can use a bit of maths, and this maths isn't going to work, and I'm going to talk about why. But to think about the coordinate for this, we think, okay, so it's got to go down 2 lots of 64, and if you need a calculator, that's fine. So I'll do it in calculator. 64 times 2, which is 128, and it needs to go right 1 lot of 64. So I click on that, and so I want the X position to be 64 and the Y position to be 128. Click OK. Now that should work because it's gone down 128, because obviously Y increases, you go down, and right 64 should work perfectly. It doesn't. And the reason for that is actually a change to ClickTeam Fusion, and I know why they've made this change, and I like this change for some situations, but for this situation it sucks. They've moved for where that active defines where it is. They've changed that so it's right in the middle of the active when you create it. So if I double click and I have a look at what's called the hotspot, when it was first created it was 32 by 32, so it was this big here. I've made it 64 by 64, but the hotspot doesn't change when you resize it. And so it put it right in the center of when it was first created. I don't like that at all. I always work with zeros. So I'm going to go 0, 0. I'm always going to have it at the top left. Now there are reasons why you want it in the middle of the object. And this causes us some headaches in those situations. But when it comes to tile creation, all that stuff, this is so much simpler. So click OK. And if you look, that player is, and I'll zoom in, that player is perfectly in that tile. Now, there's an argument for us to make it maybe 2 pixels less wide and 2 pixels less high, so that it fits within the grid. So if you have a look here, it kind of it fits at the top left. Actually, it would be 1 pixel because we can see the right hand border and the bottom border, but we can't see the left and the top one. It's things like that. Don't get bogged into that. That's not part of our spec. Our spec was to create a grid and create the minimum viable character. So create a minimum viable grid and minimum viable character, and we've done that, and we can work with this. The grid is a nice backdrop, it's not going to get in the way, it's not active, and the player isn't active, so we can move on with development in the next video. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you liked it, please click like. Also, if you've got anything you want to add or any comment you want to make, or future project proposals, or you find that different ways easier for you, please let us know down in the comments. I really want to have an opportunity to go through the comments in future videos. That would be really, really good. If you like what you see and you want to subscribe, please click the subscribe. There's something about a bell icon as well. Make sure you have the notifications. Also, we release videos on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday at 7 in the evening UK time, and you can, if you're in a different country, you can find out hopefully what that is in your local time. And yeah, it's been really, really fun, and I hope you join us for the journey. Thank you very much.